Oh, goodness. Okay. Oh, but for reals. All right. Sorry, we're talking about quarantine hair. I need
serious problems.
I need a haircut. You need a haircut.
Yes.
I could cut your hair. Okay, focus. So, well.
Yeah.
Sorry, just put kids to bed. So it's like, oh wait, turn brain back on. We were talking about last night. We did an at-home day last night.
Uh-huh.
And we were talking about last night.
Good idea, by the way.
Very good idea. Except our daughter crashed it, but that's okay.
Yeah, that happened.
What happens when you have trauma that kind of collides together? So I was asking Dan last night, the very short version of this is when we were having babies, our first baby we lost to a miscarriage at 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And that one was hard. It was a big deal, but I found out I was pregnant and the next day I miscarried. So it wasn't too traumatic, it was just hard. And then we had our next child, our oldest. And then after that, we had a daughter born with a heart defect. She had Ebstein's anomaly. You can Google that. We found that out at 4 months, and then I carried her for 5 months knowing that she was going to pass away. And then she lived 4 days and passed away. And it's a very rare heart defect. And then we had 2 more kids. And then we had a baby that I went at 8 weeks, saw the heartbeat, everything was good. And then I went to a 12-week appointment by myself. You were at work. And they did an ultrasound, and there wasn't a heartbeat anymore. And had surgery to remove that pregnancy. And then we had our youngest. So we were talking about how I was explaining to Dan how some people, our state is one of the states that is starting to open things back up a little bit, not everything. And so I look at our kids playing with friends again. And for me, that is really scary. And I couldn't kind of figure out why. And we started talking about it, and it's because everybody says, oh, kids getting this, kids aren't getting sick from COVID-19. And if they get it, they're not getting really sick, like they'll be fine. And it's 1 in a million. But when you've been the 1 in a million statistic over and over again, I also just had my best friend from high school pass away in February, not expected, and didn't get to say goodbye to her before she passed away. And it's that feeling of like, that's scary. Because I don't believe I won't be the 1 in a million. Because I've been the 1 in a million in the hospital talking to a doctor who said, this is a 1 in a million diagnosis, but there's nothing we can do. And watched my child die. And so there's some of it, that scariness of me of, I can't control other people, but I can control my house. And so the anxiety and the fear makes me just say, let's just shut down. Like, we're fine. We don't need friends. And actually, our kids are really good friends with each other, so they're good. Except that our friends around us are like family to us. And so if I do that, anyway. So that was the conversation of where do we go with this? How do you, and it doesn't have to be my experience, it could be anything right now, of something that's scary or hard, or what do you do with that?
Well, and the hard thing, and you mentioned it already really well, we talked about this a couple times, but sometimes, like seriously, our brains have a way of connecting things, right, when they're similar. But you notice oftentimes we see this happen when you fail at something, or you feel something intense, and you start to remember, hey, the other times I felt like this was happening, and this is what I was doing. And this is a similar experience for you, where you're going through it, you're saying, hey, this is intense, and I'm afraid for all these reasons. And let me remember all those other times in my life when I felt similarly afraid and upset and scared to death. All these kind of things that just pile up. You mentioned the word like traumatic, like trauma. It's interesting because 2 people can go through the same thing, and it can be traumatic for one and not another. There's a lot of things that go into what makes something traumatic, but I want to put out there, and part of why we were talking through this is like what do you do when it starts to pile up that way, and you're going like, I was already, it's already a rough situation, but now I'm dealing with all of these other things kind of at the same time,
and things that I haven't dealt with, and
yeah.
This is not like
it's not like you were struggling
we're good.
with it.
It's not something that I struggle with every day. It just brought it back of that fear of something happening to one of my kids. and that like
Yeah.
I'm done, like walk away, lock everything down, we're fine. And it hasn't been there since for a really long time. It hasn't been there.
Yeah. Well, and one of the keys, and we talk about this in different ways. I mean, obviously, number one, if it's something that it's like, it's really intense, it keeps coming back, and it's like everything you try isn't working, obviously, go and talk to your mental health professional. But always, of course, a good idea. There's another piece that worked really well for you when we talked about this. There are ways to kind of help process through and disconnect when it's something like in this case when you talked about it. You're right, statistically the threat to children is very, very low, research wise and things like that for the COVID-19, but there's a very real fear for you of wait, but what if, I mean, we've thought about these things before. We have, and it ended up not going well.
Statistically, the chance of having a child with the disease that she had was very low.
Ebstein's
Statistically,
anomaly.
after you see a heartbeat, it goes low.
Uh-huh.
Statistically, my friend shouldn't have died at her age. And so that's my issue in the brain, where it's like, yeah, I get that.
Yeah, facts don't work.
Facts don't work
for them, and I totally and that's a common thing when the traumatic things pile up. It's not about facts, and so something that worked and helped, and I can put this as a quick analogy. If I were to take a trap, and let's say even just a small little mouse trap or something, when that tension is there and it's sitting there, it's a little bit like this fear, right? Where you see it and it's like, I don't know. I mean, anybody who's set one of those little, the bar comes flying over and they're really like, not usually high quality sorts of things. And so you're setting it and it's snapping on your fingers and all this kind of stuff. So generally, if you pull one of those out, people are like, whoa, and it's not, they know, that's not going to kill me. That's not a horrible thing. But there's an emotional response to it. And there's an interesting thing that if you consider that fear, that, kind of very difficult situation that comes up again, you can consider it kind of like that mouse trap. There's an interesting way you can think about, like, relieving that pressure. And if there's two of us and I'm holding it in my hand and Michelle was to come up to me and we're to talk through things, there is a piece to that where it's like putting her hand on top of that trap. Now it seems very scary. Sometimes it's that idea of even like talking through the traumatic stuff, trying to just bring it up. It can be scary. But if it's someone that's supportive, someone who can talk it through with you, someone who can support you, that it becomes like deactivated. Now, if you keep your hand flat, you pull it, communicate with each other, you pull that, hand off at the same time, it will be noisy. It will snap, it's scary, but nobody gets hurt. It's not actually what you thought it was going to be. And so what we ended up talking through in this situation, obviously we understand all situations are different, but if you can communicate with your friends, the people that are close, a spouse would be, great or anything like that, but people that you can trust, if you can communicate openly of like, hey, this is where this goes, understanding that yes, it's connecting with other things, there's a piece to that where it's like, yeah, it seems very scary to do, but it relieves that pressure, it relieves that tension, relieves that fear.
It releases the trap without anybody getting hurt.
And it ends up not being what you were very afraid that it would be. And again, that's a specific situation. But if you can view fear that way, and when we can connect, when we can find ways, and even for us, that was last night, talking it through and going, hey, I didn't really notice it at the time, but I mean, we remember this, we remember that.
But it helped because once I talked about it, though, then we could decide together, okay, here's what we're comfortable with right now. We can see friends in this way right now.
Yeah.
And we also could talk together and realize I had the sweetest message from one of my friends. Because really, these aren't just like friends. There's a couple families around us that are like family to us. Like I consider their parents and their kids like family, and our kids have grown up together. And one of my friends sent me a text message and she said, I'm fine with our kids playing, but I know that this is hard for you. So we'll wait till you're ready. And for me, having that open conversation of like, okay, she gets it and I'm not going to lose friends, but also going with Dan and realizing here's where the fear is. let's talk about it, and then we could create a solution that worked for everybody and put that at ease. But I think this works, the whole mousetrap idea and talking, it works for your kids right now who may be struggling. It works for maybe your business is struggling. It works for so many things and fear and situations, and talking about what's scary rather than just saying, I'm done, and shutting down.
When it's the same kind of, you'll see this a lot in whether it's self-help or talking to the therapist and however it goes. But there's a concept of just when you get that fear, the gut reaction is to tense up or to take a step back. But we find out what actually helps more than anything is engaging and leaning in. And so with your, you can't get support, you can't get help, you can't release that tension unless you lean in and engage. And it is that part of, I'm not saying, throw everything out there and create a lot more tension. I'm saying find the supportive and helpful people and lean into those relationships and really connect with them. That's what helped us here, and that's what I've seen it help a lot of people. So it's a couple of thoughts. I know this one a little more, we had some more serious things to go through, so this one's definitely longer. So thank you for watching. I hope it's helpful. And that's all I had.
Well, I just was going to say it's longer, but I hope it's good, because a lot of us, there's a lot of connections, like you said, that happens with all of this, and we have to, a lot of things, people are struggling with different things, and the whole point of doing these videos is try and help. Yeah. So hopefully, I always say, in vulnerability, there gets to be connection and growth. Yeah. So hopefully it helps.
That's as a quick note. Well, nothing's ever quick when I say that. Sorry, but it. Thank you for that. It really isn't. We weren't trying to put stuff together to try and be fancy or make money or stuff. We thought about this and we were like, we wanted to have ways, and especially with where things have been so tense and scary and in different ways, and then frustrating in others. Just kind of the social atmosphere of society right now. We wanted to find a way to just kind of share some thoughts and be able to talk together and see if that's helpful for people. So,
and it has been. We've gotten a lot of messages. So as long as it's helpful, we'll do it.
Keep them coming. So,
and hopefully one of these times.
Wishing you all the best.